Hi everyone, my name is Callie Stewart and I'm with the exhibit design team. This will be our Rockhopper Penguin exhibit proposal. So first of all, I'm going to give you an exhibit overview. It's going to be a naturalistic immersive design. Exhibits are going to be grouped bioclimatically, and we have a $6 million budget for this project. We want to focus on conservation. Penguins are threatened due to disease, invasive species, and climate change, and they could be vulnerable to extinction. So we really want to have that as a focus of our exhibit. We're going to be following the master plan from the Denver Zoo that has a focus on conservation and education on their master plan. And just a little bit about the animal. Rockhopper penguins are native to subantarctic islands of South Atlantic, Indian, and South Pacific Oceans. They live in rocky terrain, so we're really going to focus on water features, rocky ledges, and cliffs, ideal for nest breeding or nest building that will encourage natural behaviors like breeding. This is a mock-up of the exhibit design. So at number 1, you will see that is the water area. Number 2, we're going to have an underground tunnel. There are multiple guest viewing platforms that will be over and under the exhibit in the underground viewing section. Number 5 is our indoor holding area. So that's going to be indoor holding for the penguins, quarantine. That will be the service areas you'll see on the other side for the keepers, for kitchen, food, maintenance, and that will connect to number 7, which is the indoor nursery and the penguin care center. So you can get to that from the back if you're a keeper. And then number 6, that's going to be the gate to the indoor holding. So that is a very secure gate that we have. And then at number 8, you'll see we have electronic boards with climate change information, information about the penguins specifically, pledge boxes, and different information that will be updated electronically. The viewer platforms is also where we will have different demonstrations done by the keepers with the penguins as far as training, maybe, during nesting time, if we have chicks that are being hand raised, it'll be, at the discretion of the animals caretakers, of course. Otherwise, there'll be no other opportunities for the guests to actually touch the penguins unless it is a designated, kind of interaction performance or talk. And then I don't have it on there, but there is a children's play area that is kind of outside the nursery so that we want to keep guests there longer, whether they're watching the penguins interact, watching medical care, or having their child, learn and play at the same time. This is the back of the exhibit, so the off exhibit design. So this is the back of kind of the rocky mountain terrain that we were just looking at. So number 1, that is our indoor holding and quarantine. So that's going to be quarantine for new penguins, sick penguins, and then just their indoor holding areas. And then the kitchen and keeper service area is number 2. And that's going to be a whole indoor area in there that's going to connect to number 3, which is our penguin care center and nursery. So exhibit goals for the penguins. We do want to create the naturalistic environment that mimics their native environment. Rocky cliffs for nesting to encourage breeding. We're going to use saltwater and freshwater features to encourage swimming and social behavior. Penguins can drink saltwater. Their bodies are okay consuming it, but they do prefer to drink fresh water, so we want to offer both of those, obviously. Zero entry pool in areas with low current, so we will have some areas with current and then low current, kind of stagnant zero entry pool so that the chicks can stand safely and feel comfortable when learning to swim. So we don't want to have everything be extremely deep. The glass in the tunnel is going to keep light and sound at a level safe for penguins so that stress behaviors on the penguins are minimized. That's especially important during breeding season, nesting. Penguins are very loud themselves, but we don't want them stressed out from visitors at all. So we're going to use substrate of tiny pebbles and soft sand. This encourages their natural behaviors such as foraging, scratching, breeding, and nesting. We want to eliminate as much concrete as possible. It's better for the penguin. It's better for, the visitor's aesthetic, and it's just better for everyone in general. And we are going to have large boulder barriers around the nesting area to discourage fighting and aggressive behavior during breeding season. Calm vibes. So we really want to kind of quarantine that area off so that we don't have the fighting and the aggressive behavior once the nesting time starts. And that's very important. We're going to have slides with flowing water for entry, for enrichment, just kind of, something kind of like a playground for the penguins. Hiding spaces for enrichment items within the rocks and the terrain, food and treats, areas hidden in rocks for enrichment, and then live fish and squid in the exhibit. I haven't nailed down the species yet exactly of what we're going to have in there, but for enrichment, we do want to have some, live animals, live fish, squid, krill, to encourage their natural, foraging behavior. So they're not just fed, from humans. Humans as in the keeper, not. Okay, so we want to create a unique exhibit that benefits the guests as well as the penguins, like we had talked about. We want to educate the visitors on conservation, threats to penguins, climate change, and about the penguin specifically, so they can learn more about penguins. We want to create a learning area for children that's interactive but also fun, that they want to stay at and they want to learn. We want increase in pledges and donations to conservation efforts. We want to educate people about, everything from climate change, invasive species, pollution, plastic in our oceans. There's a whole world of things that we can educate people on that may not know how they can make a difference. We want to provide a behind-the-scenes experience for showcasing our nesting area and have our penguin care center where visitors can observe our nursery and just daily care of the penguins, whether that's training or regular medical checkups or target training or actual hatching. There's a whole different all different multitude of things that they could observe, and that will inspire them to care more and have a personal kind of connection and investment with the penguins and the staff, and to be able to see that bond. So exhibit goals for the keeper: we want to create safe passages for all our keepers, non-slip flooring, multiple access areas to the exhibit and to the penguins, barriers, stationary and movable for pool draining and exhibit maintenance. You don't want the penguins in the way. It can be dangerous for them, dangerous for the keepers if they're doing maintenance. We're going to have a lot of hoses built into our natural rock formations throughout the exhibit, so they'll be concealed, but they will be within fake rock structures in different areas. So for convenience, easy access, less time to, clean and do maintenance in the habitat. A drainage area intentionally sloped so water does not pool. We don't want stagnant water. Penguins are really susceptible to different fungal infections. So we don't want stagnant water at all, and we want it to naturally run into the drain because that will have less maintenance, and it's also better for the penguins to be able to dry off when they come out of the water. Their feathers are kind of water repellent. They have an oil in their feathers, and they want to be able to shake and dry off as soon as possible. So we're going to have freezers and fridges in the zookeeper kitchen area for food prep and storage for convenience. That's going to be in the back area of that rock formation. All maintenance equipment needed stored in keeper service area for easy, quick access. And then it's going to be a multi-functioning indoor off exhibit area. So that's going to include, like I said before, the indoor space, quarantine holding, the keeper service area, kitchen, and then that's going to have a connection to the penguin care center and nursery. And of course, the keepers will have access to all necessary medical equipment needed that they are trained on, in the event of a medical emergency. And then also, we'll have a vet on call, emergency contact numbers, and we will also have all logs and maintenance, feeding, water and air parameters, both written and digital for the keepers, so that we have, good records of everything. So measures of success for the visitor: we want to see an increase in guest time spent at the exhibit by hopefully 5 to 10 minutes. We want to see an increase in pledges. And we want to see an increase in concern for conservation of our oceans in post-visit surveys. So those post-visit surveys are really important to kind of read the temperature on the guests and kind of figure out, if we, inspire them to do more and take action and care. an increase in visitor retention, guests returning for multiple visits, and season pass sales. Measures of success for the penguin. We want them to show increased nesting and breeding. We want to see positive and natural behaviors, social behaviors, overall health, and decrease in stress behaviors. We want to see an increase in their exercise, play, and socialization within the colony. And then a reduction, of course, in aggressive behavior during nesting, breeding, if they're stealing rocks from each other and fighting. We just want to kind of try to keep that to a minimum. And a higher success rate of chicks being born healthy, that is. So regulating bodies, constraints, and considerations. So some of the regulating bodies that we deal with when designing an exhibit would be the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the AZA, which is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, OSHA, which is worker safety, basically, safety, health association, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They deal with, our air quality, water quality, stuff like that. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Animal Welfare Act, and Endangered Species Act. So we are not going to use any substrates. Some of the ones that OSHA has to regulate are cat litter, peanut shells, because of the dust, because of allergies, etc. So we are not going to use any of that. We're only going to use rocks, pebbles, and natural substrates that are not under OSHA regulations. So OSHA and the USDA, they go by AZA standards as their national standards. So the AZA guidelines are actually stricter than their standards, so we go by the stricter one. So all gates, barriers, monitoring, and other safety features will follow the AZA guidelines. We're going to use sound barriers such as glass and acrylic, used to keep noise level at a suitable level for humans without hearing problems. So that's an OSHA standard, and that is found suitable for penguins. Parameters such as water quality, air quality, filtration, humidity levels, temperature, that's going to be checked twice a day and displayed around the clock if applicable, such as the humidity and temperature can be displayed. The temperature needs to be kept between 32 and 50 degrees, and that is the temps are listed in the AZA manual, and then it also needs to have a low humidity because penguins do not do well in humidity. So some considerations, we have the budget of $6 million, as it was mentioned. The enclosure will need to be indoors because it needs to be climate controlled between 32 and 52 degrees Fahrenheit. It can have some open air features to allow penguins outdoors on exhibit October through April due to local conditions in the winter season. If the outdoor temperature matches their temperature that they need to thrive at and the humidity levels, and we can definitely, open up our open air features, but otherwise we need to really have that be climate controlled, especially in the summer months. When penguins are out on exhibit, they're going to have the option to be indoors. So they'll have a separate entrance, be able to go indoors to the indoor holding area if they so choose. And shelter options, of course, being protected from weather and environmental conditions. That's AZA standard 1.5.7. So there will be multiple, rock shelters, indoor areas for them to go if they need to. Open water will be available indoors and out year round, and pools should never be allowed to freeze. With regular maintenance, that should never be a problem. And with the climate control, you should never have water levels below freezing. The humidity must be kept low and needs to be considered when giving penguins access to open areas. So even if the temp is 40 degrees, that's great. But if you have a really high humidity, that's not going to work for the penguins, and we're not going to be able to do, open air on those days. So the master plan for the Denver Zoo, education satellite. We want an education area close to the children's play area, serving as a classroom to teach about rockhopper penguins, why they're endangered, and climate change issues, but kid-oriented so that they can understand and make it fun. As far as education, that is one of their main goals. So web cameras underwater and disguised in the nesting area, so kids and adults alike can follow their journey and adventures from home. With COVID, homeschooling, webcams have become a big source of entertainment for kids at home and kids that can't go to the zoo, and parents who may have immune issues. So a lot of kids really are depending on these web cameras. So they we're going to have multiple ones placed, and we'll kind of see which ones get the most hits, and maybe during nesting season we'll have more the nesting area, and then, depending, so they'll be able to be moved around. Animal adventures, being able to watch penguins be cared for in the Penguin Care Center and nursery will create unique memories for people. We'll have immersive experiences in the tunnel, and then, of course, conservation, like we talked about. So all different conservation efforts and conservation information. The size based on 50 penguins is going to be the land area of 3,000 square feet, pool area. I have the numbers listed here if you want to get into the math. We are going to have space exceeding the minimums to accommodate our nesting areas because the nesting areas are not included in the AZA minimums. AZA accreditation standard 1.1.1, we will comply with all local, state, and federal laws, of course. The Endangered Species Act applies to penguins listed as threatened or endangered. So northern rockhopper penguins are not threatened, so they're not under U.S. government regulation. Southern rockhopper penguins are. They fall under the ESA, so there are some challenges if importing them from other countries, but as far as movement within the U.S., that should not be a concern. So these are the other AZA accreditation standards, and the first one, 1.5, and 2, the enclosure will be designed with the penguin's mental and physical well-being in mind, like we talked about, enrichment, nesting area block to reduce stress. It'll reflect their natural environment. AZA standard 2.7.1, quarantine, that is in that indoor housing area. All birds that are sick, new, they're going to have separate air and water systems than any other exhibit section because you don't want contamination. Land area holding facility needs to be at a certain size, and of course we will meet those standards. Pool area and depth varies based on the individuals in quarantine, so a 3-foot area by 2-foot depth. Individual pools for those penguins who are sick and cannot go in the water with other penguins. So air quality and water quality are of course very important. Penguins are susceptible to fungal infections, so air filtration is extremely important. You need a high quality air filter. And Aspergillus fumigatus spores, it lists there 2.5 to 3 microns, so we need filters that will remove spores in that size range or smaller. So we all got educated in that during COVID, I would think. So if you can understand, that's kind of the same thing. So air turnover rate at 15 air changes per hour recommended, and regular air cultures to be taken. So as we said, both fresh and salt water used. We need to watch bacteria levels. Water filtration is going to be ozone, UV light, and biological. Chlorine and bromine can be used to control the coliform bacteria levels, and that needs to be in small amounts, so it needs to be carefully monitored. Skimmers will be used at all times to avoid oil accumulation, that oil that can hurt their feathers. And then water chemistry is taken once a week. And that is another AZA standard. Climate control, like we talked about, humidity is very important, temperature is very important. HVAC system, heat exchanger, air handling unit and chiller, furnace system, we need timers, sensors, digital components to run the system, daily mechanical system checks, the logs we talked about, and a backup generator, of course, in case of a power failure. Drainage, there needs to be separate drainage, as I talked about, to avoid contamination, separate drainage for the Penguin Care Center from runoff and maintenance. Intake valves, skimmers need to be covered to avoid birds getting sucked into them. Surface drainage is important for drying of birds when they exit, as we talked about. And then multiple hoses for spraying off surfaces incorporated into the design. Safety and containment. So video cameras above and below water for monitoring in the nesting area. They're going to be used for security and safety. And then the webcams all, can be used for entertainment as well, for people at home. Safe entryways for keepers, divers in and out of pool area. As we talked about, barriers to block birds from pool when doing maintenance and draining. Pebbles, small rocks as substrate. So that's not going to cause, penguin flipper feet issues. All exits and entrances will be secure, including shift doors, gates, keeper access doors, and locking mechanisms, and that's per AZA standard 11.3.1. Containment barriers need to be buried 2 feet into the ground. Some penguins can dig, and we just don't want a situation to occur where they can tunnel out in prison break. Boundary between the public and penguins will be acrylic tunnel, glass, and open air areas and moats. And so there's never going to be an opportunity for a human to touch a penguin unless there is a penguin with a keeper doing an actual interactive demonstration. And then each penguin is going to have a color-coded ID band and flipper plus microchip. Those color-coded ID bands will have the colors listed and the penguin's name so that people will know their names. They can find which one is which. I've seen that at a couple different facilities, and with guest retention and people with season passes, they get to know the penguins' names and they call them by name, after they've been there a few times. So it does create that bond as well. And the last slide is just going to be my sources for this proposal. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much and have a great day.